When I first started learning about pig organs and tissues being transplanted into human beings, I had a lot of questions. TV, film, and general knowledge will tell you that transplants are pretty risky, and even human-to-human ones often end in disaster. The thing about a transplant is that your body might reject it. Your immune system might detect the transplanted organ, decide it's a bad thing, and attack it, in the same way to how disease-causing viruses and bacteria get attacked by your immune system. So what makes human bodies okay with pig bits, and why are pigs being used? Welcome to Brain Noises, thank you for joining. I am Chloe, science enthusiast and recovering physicist, and on this channel we discuss the thoughts and the feelings that pass through my mind, generally relating to science, but I cannot make any promises. So if that sounds like something you might enjoy, then please subscribe and keep watching. Just quickly, before I get into the video, hello, how you doing? It's been a while. I have not posted in about a month and I am very sorry for that. I've just had quite a lot of life change going on, and to be honest, I got a little bit overwhelmed. There are almost 400 of you now, and although that is an extremely small number relative to a lot of channels on YouTube, it sort of brought this increased pressure that I didn't anticipate feeling. You may have noticed that most of my videos, or at least a lot of the ones that I've done recently, are about physics and the universe. And although that's where my kind of educational background is, the idea with this channel is not meant to be just physics. Obviously, I'm going to naturally tend towards those topics, but I, originally wanted to talk about just anything that I found interesting that was in the news or in my brain. But because it was the videos that everyone was responding to, I was like, okay, I'll do more physics. But in the future, I will be mixing it up, so apologies to anyone that's a disappointing thing to learn. But I hope you stick around for the physics one still at least. Anyway, let's get into it. The FDA describes xenotransplantation as any procedure that involves the transplantation, implantation, or infusion into a human recipient of either live cells, tissues, or organs from a non-human animal source, or human body fluids, cells, tissues, or organs that have had ex vivo contact with live non-human animal cells, tissues, or organs. That sounds like a mouthful, but in this video I'm mostly just talking about organs or tissues that have been taken from an animal and transplanted into a human. The use of animal tissues and organs for transplant is mostly driven by the high demand for human organs. About 10 patients die each day in the US while on the waiting list to receive life-saving organ transplants. But there are also other drivers for this research, so increasing evidence suggests that transplantation of cells and tissues may be therapeutic for certain diseases, such as neurodegenerative disorders and diabetes, where again, human materials are not usually available. We aren't going to focus on that topic today, but it's an interesting one to keep in mind. It's not just about, oh, this human needs a heart, let's put one in them. It's about this human has this disease, and if we transplant certain types of healthy cells into them, could those healthy cells then cure them? The first murmurings of xenotransplantation can be found in Greek mythology and religion, where humans are thought to have been interested in the possibility of merging features from various animal species. Now, this is a bit vague, but a more recent, more tangible example can be seen in the world of blood transfusion. Between the 17th and 20th centuries, blood was transfused from various animal species into patients with a variety of conditions. Skin grafts then began in the 19th century with grafts taken from a variety of animals, but frogs in particular were apparently very popular. Quite famously, but also quite disturbingly, in the 20th century, grafts from chimpanzee testes were implanted into elderly men. Invented by the surgeon Sergei Voronov, the operation was once seen as an elixir of eternal youth and sexual prowess. Millionaires across the world signed up for the surgery, and by the 1930s, thousands of people had it done, including 500 in France alone. The demand was so high that Voronov even opened his own monkey farm to cope with it. You can actually read quite a lot about this weirdness online if you have a Google. I've also linked a few of the articles below. And I think although a lot of this stuff sounds really insane, it's important to remember that although in a sense they were failings and they didn't work as intended, this kind of experimentation and research did then become quite foundational to our kind of modern understanding of transplantation. I'm not saying it was necessarily justified. I'm just saying. In the 1960s, there were some ultimately unsuccessful chimpanzee kidney transplants, and in 1964, the first heart transplant in a human ever was performed by Hardy, using a chimpanzee heart, but the patient died within 2 hours. What followed was a chimpanzee liver to human transplant in 1966, and then a baboon liver transplant, which actually saw the patient survive for 70 days, which is pretty good. In my humble opinion. So by the time the first clinical pig tissue transplant was carried out in 1993, there had actually been quite a long, albeit fairly unsuccessful, depending on how you look at it, history of xenotransplantation. And as I said, I say unsuccessful, but many of these experiments became building blocks for the research that we see today. I guess that's just how research works. So why are pigs used instead of monkeys, say? Well, pigs have short gestation periods, so aren't pregnant for that long, and produce large litters, so you can create a lot of them at one time. Their organs are close in size to those of humans, and they are less likely than non-human primates to transfer zoonotic diseases to humans because of genetic differences, and their tissues, such as heart valves and skin grafts, have been successfully transplanted into people for years. I think another interesting point from this, or at least a point that I found quite interesting, was this idea that because pigs aren't as similar to humans, they are less likely to bring zoonotic diseases to them. And that is a big part of the concerns around transplantation, is that it'll provide a bridge for diseases to start to infect humans. But yeah, it was kind of one I didn't really think about, is that it's like they'll intentionally choose animals that aren't similar to humans, or at least dissimilar enough to try to mitigate that issue. Fast forward to January this year, and the first transplant of a pig heart into a human was completed. David Bennett, the recipient, died in March, 2 months after the transplant operation. Despite this, the transplant is still considered a huge breakthrough. But why? It's really important to note that Bennett, who had severe heart failure, was given the heart on a compassionate basis, so there were no other options left. And this was just one case of someone getting given a pig heart. It's very far from a proper clinical trial or anything like that. As I mentioned at the start of this video, a huge issue with transplants is your body rejecting it. It's why people who have organ transplants will have to go on immunosuppressants to stop their own immune system from attacking this new thing that's inside them. In the case of this pig heart, to prevent it from being rejected, 10 genetic changes were made, so 4 pig genes were deleted and 6 human genes were added. A good one to note as well is that a few of the genes were to do with the size of the heart. So pig hearts are slightly larger than human hearts, and some of the genes that are to do with making the heart grow bigger were deleted as well. This note on the organ and the potential for rejection is really important, because what happened with Bennett was that after he received the new heart, it was said to be performing like a rock star. That's a direct quote from the doctors who treated him. So it was said to be doing really, really well. And doctors suspected that it was in fact a pig cytomegalovirus infection that caused the heart to fail, that then led to his death. This is still just suspected. It's really hard to know what actually caused his death, especially considering how ill he was before. When it comes to organ transplants, though it can take weeks and sometimes longer for your body to reject it, the initial days following are really, really important. So again, him doing well and then declining a couple of months after the transplant is another indication that his own immune system rejecting it is likely to not have been the cause. So the key here is that the viral infection may have been why the pig heart failed, rather than his immune system. A number of reports have described this risk as well known and avoidable. And though this is really sad for Bennett's case, it does imply something positive for xenotransplantation as a whole. But how did it happen? Once animals are infected with this type of virus, the viral DNA remains inside of some cells. This is similar to a lot of viruses that humans get. So their immune system can keep it under control and the virus kind of just lies low. But then if the animal becomes weakened, the virus can reactivate and cause further infections. Because this was a pig virus, Bennett would have no immunity to it. It would have been carried in via the heart, and then Bennett's immune system would not have been able to recognise it, just making it a lot more likely that the infection had the time to kind of get out of control before eventually his immune system responded. The virus apparently doesn't infect human cells, but it would be capable of infecting the pig cells that the heart was made up of. Bennett was also on immunosuppressant drugs, which I mentioned earlier, which is a part of why his immune system would have been quite weak. In 2020, it was found that baboons don't live as long if they're given hearts with porcine? I've actually never said that. But basically the baboons didn't live as long if they were given hearts that had this pig virus in them. But just to reiterate, we really cannot say for sure how Bennett died, and we can't sort of say it was definitely because of this. And just, from what I can see, it's still not totally conclusive. I mean, what parts of science ever are, but you know what I mean. Oh, okay, that part of the video and my leg goes numb. The thing is, pigs bred to provide organs for transplant are bred in special conditions to stop this kind of thing happening. So they are raised in these special clean facilities that are free from pathogens. The failure to detect this virus may have been due to the test not being sensitive enough, or due to latent infections, which is kind of what I described earlier, and it's a lot harder to detect those very low levels, especially because in the case of latent infections, no new viruses are being produced. Okay, really numb leg. I'm going to talk to you from here for a little bit. Sorry if this is too close. You can sit further away from your screen if it's uncomfortable. This angle's quite questionable as well. I've completely forgotten where I was, but just before I finish this point, it was reported that the testing that took place in this case followed protocols that were accepted by the FDA. It's likely that protocols might need to be updated to kind of get in line with like ongoing research, but that was the case at the time. And as plans move forward for future clinical trials, I believe more sophisticated testing techniques and stuff are going to be used. This is at least what a spokesperson said. Okay, back to sitting down. Sorry, this has been a really inconsistent visual experience. I apologise for that. Anyway, now we've been through all of that. If the virus is what contributed to Bennett's death, rather than the immune system rejecting the organ, then the results of Denner's baboon study suggest that other transplant recipients may live longer if given virus-free hearts. Revivicor, another thing I've never said out loud. Revivicor, a subsidiary of United Therapeutics, developed the pig behind Bennett's transplant and has not commented on the detection of the virus. There is no evidence of wrongdoing by the companies. New Scientist did an article on this, and neither firm responded to New Scientist's request for comment before publication. In quite an interesting example that I just want to mention of success, the line of pigs that were used to create the heart for Bennett's transplant were also used to create kidneys, and these pigs were used to provide kidneys for a brain-dead patient. The kidneys weren't rejected during the 77 hours that the experiment lasted, and this experiment is thought to be paving the way for clinical trials. We have also seen transplants of pig pancreas cells into people with diabetes, and the use of eardrum implants made from pig guts, which has seen widespread success in a group of 72 patients. I think something like all but 4 patients saw really positive results. And then more recently, in August this year, a group of 20 people who were legally blind or visually impaired received a transplant of a cornea made from pig collagen. All of them had improved sight as a result, including 3 who now have 20/20 vision after being declared legally blind. Pig tissue is also already used in other areas of medicine, such as replacement valves for damaged human hearts, as I mentioned, but some people do find it unacceptable on sort of ethical and or religious grounds. There was actually a survey done with regards to the religious grounds one. Quite a few religions consider it completely acceptable, and then others don't. And then ethical grounds, obviously harvesting organs from animals and sort of growing them for this purpose is something that is definitely up for debate as to whether it's acceptable, whether it's kind of quote unquote worth it. I'm sure many people also find it spooky or icky. I know that especially certain types of organs like the eyes, the heart, the brain, people really consider them parts of the soul. Mentioning the brain, I can't see a world where we ever have pig brains implanted. What a thought. But yeah, so people consider these kind of like, you know, the eyes are the window to the soul, and like the heart implant would kind of change who you are. And you know, I do sort of get it. It's like how many bits of you stop being you before it is still you. Does that make sense? So would you get a pig transplant? Let me know in the comments, and obviously just general thoughts on the topic. I certainly, when I started looking into the topic, was very surprised by a lot of the stuff I read about. It's a pretty fascinating subject, and there's still a lot that we don't know. So intrigued to see what happens next. Anyway, as per usual, thank you for watching. Thanks for hanging around as well, sticking it out after my hiatus. I hope to be posting weekly, if not bi-weekly, and I will see you in the next one. Goodbye.